So today we're just going to kind of going over ventilation and the new Z vent. This is a pressure regulated vent instead of a volume regulated. So instead of it being regulated by the volume like the new ports that we have now, this is regulated more off the pressure that is created in the circuit. So there's just a couple differences. Most of the big differences you're going to see between this and the new port is going to be just in the setup. Otherwise, vent settings are going to end up being vent settings. It's not a huge difference. But one of the things I do like to kind of go over prior to this is just the different types of ventilation that we have with ACMV, SIMV, CPAP, and our bi-level or BiPAP. So I guess the first way I always kind of show it is the ACMV, SIMV. So these are going to be either AC, or just see it as AC, MV,
And what do those mean?
Assist control, mechanical ventilation, and I believe this is spontaneous intermittent mechanical ventilation. The whole point of it is that they're both for two very different things. We're not going to use this one a lot because this is used more usually as a weaning someone off the vent, which in EMS, we're not going to be the ones trying to wean people off of the vent. That would be like RT's job. So ACMV is great for lung rest, lung recovery, just trying to allow the patient who's in a state of illness or a disease or an injury to kind of recover from it. So it'd be like your cardiac arrest, your overdoses, your massive asthma attacks, stuff like that. The way ACMV works is that you're going to put in your vent settings. So whatever you have, if these are your vent settings down here, whatever you have in here, across, and this will be the axis of time, and this will be, you can just do pressure. So pressure, time, we're going to have our waveform, we go like this, vent's going to ventilate, and then it's going to go, and then whatever you had the respiratory rate set to is when it's going to go again. That compares to SIMV, same axis here, go, it's going to ventilate whatever it's set to, and keep going. The big difference comes as...
Well, how is that different than your...
How's it different? The big difference comes in the pressure trigger. So usually it's P-trig or just any kind of pressure trigger, whatever you set it to. If a patient initiates a breath in ACMV, so if right here, so obviously it hasn't gone far enough yet. If right here the patient creates a big enough pressure difference in the circuit to initiate a breath, to whatever you set it to, it will give that patient the full set breath and keep going. And then once it reaches this distance from here, it will initiate its next breath. So you could end up with almost a breath stacking. So the whole point of it is that if a patient takes a breath in ACMV, it's going to give them whatever it is that you set here. So if you set the tidal volume to 450, it's going to give the patient 450.
Even though I might try to breathe on my own.
Right, that's where SIMV comes in. If a patient tries to initiate a breath here in SIMV, the patient can do whatever they want to do with it. So they can have a small breath, they can have a big breath. Whatever the patient is capable of, as long as they hit that pressure trigger. That's the SIMV. So,
but we're not going to use that so much.
Not so much, because most of what we're doing is people who are post-cardiac arrest, people who are in ARDS, severe illness states, where you want lung rest and recovery. This is great for weaning, because they're able to get their 12 breaths, but then if they want another 6 on top of it, these 6 they're in control of, and it'd be kind of very unpleasant to try to take a breath and then to get a bunch of air forced down your throat that you can't control. So this is more ideal for that situation. So for the most part, if you don't want people breathing in ACMV, you want them to be sedated and compliant with the vent. So usually a lot of alarms that we get in ACMV is going to be from patients waking up. If they wake up and they start to breathe on their own, it's going to cause a bunch of alarms in ACMV because they're fighting against it. They're breathing more than what you said. Usually this happens because we're picking people up in the ICU where they've been in a dark, cold, stagnant room for the past 3 days. And there hasn't been a lot of stimulus. And then we come in, turn the lights on, and yank them over to another bed. And then all of a sudden now they're like awake, and the vent's freaking out. And you're like, I don't know, did I set it wrong? No, it's usually just that they're not sedated enough. Because they usually keep them in a light sedation. And the drug of choice is usually going to be propofol, which is by design a light sedative. So it's not ideal for EMS. So that is the very short and sweet of ACMV versus SIMV. In both of these, you're going to get the same vent settings that you can set for the most part. You're going to have a tidal volume. Or, if I look at this, VT, you're going to have a respiratory rate. You're going to have a PEEP. And you're going to have a pressure trigger. And FiO2. And this is usually going to be in percent. Anymore, everything is moving to the blender-based FiO2s. So it's a fraction of inspired oxygen. With that, the Z-Vent's actually wonderful about that. You can actually really easily dial it in and get it set right. The only difference is that this is going to be ACMV and SIMV. The one addition that you can get with SIMV is you can get the pressure support in addition to these. So when a patient takes their breath, they can do it with a BiPAP type of method, as they can have additional inspiratory pressure to help that breath. The best way of thinking of BiPAP in that instance is going to be like having a spotter when you're doing like a bench press. You have someone there to like help it on its way up. They're not lifting it for you, but they're certainly helping out. So that's the pressure support, and that just it feeds into the whole weaning process. It's just helping someone get their lungs back on its feet. Yeah, these are just going to be your simple modes then. You're going to see with your intubated, or they might have a trach, but the ventilator is still doing the work for them. Most likely it's going to be ACMV. It's the most, I suppose you could say, reliable. And with that, we can start moving into the ventilator itself, because the Z-Vent does have quite a few differences from the report. Okay. So with the Z-Vent, the first thing you're going to notice is that when you turn it on, it's going to start making this grinding kind of sound, and that's it trying.
It's supposed to sound like that.
Yep. So it sounds like this because what it's doing is trying to detect and see if there's a patient already attached. With this ventilator, once you start it, it's ventilating. So right now it's not ventilating just because we haven't turned it to a mode yet. But once we hook it up and we go to check the circuit, it is ventilating from start. So with this, you have to use a Z-Vent. cannot use a Newport vent. You can't even get a Newport vent to fit on here if you wanted to. The exhalation valve and proximal line hoses do not fit on the hoses on the Z-vent. So, looking at the top, you've got your gas tube.
Hey TJ, do you want me to come closer?
Yeah, that'd be great.
You can move the camera.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Here, we can move.
Here, I'll just hold it.
Because I wanted to see the vent.
Yeah. So you can hook up your gas tube here. Slides on there. It's kind of flimsy, so it might bend one way or the other, but you just stick it on there and it stays on good. Clear and green hose will go onto the silver with the clear, and the green hose will go onto the green port. Set up. This is the air intake for room air for blending in, and then you've got your hose for oxygen. The problem with this hose that I've come to find is that the area for which you grab on to remove it or put it on when it's under pressure is very small. So it's ideal to have like a wrench or something like that on you. Apparently there's these pigtails that we can use that just quick change it right off, and just it stays attached to this, so you don't have to worry about this at all. But anyway, that's just something we're trying to move into to get that to work right. Otherwise, the circuit is, well, circuits are circuits. You've got an exhalation valve here with the appropriate tubing, and you've got your proximal line is on the elbow here. So unlike the Newport circuit, if you take this off, now you don't have your proximal line to attach to. So it has to have the elbow on.
Okay.
To do
Are we gonna have separate filters like the?
we may be getting new filters, but otherwise you could just use the same filter.
Oh, those filters will still work.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. With the filters, it's all about just the dead space amount. So usually it's about 25 to 35 milliliters of dead space. So it just has to be accounted for. When it comes to changing circuits on this, so the Z-vent's already calibrated for the Z circuit. So it's already got the dead space of this calculated out, ready to go. To do the circuit check, this first mode that it's set to here is adult. So you would green select it, and it's going to ventilate. Oh, look at that, we got the remote. What you're going to get is you're going to get the patient disconnect alarm there. So obviously it's not connected to the patient, so that's good. Then we're going to manually ventilate.
Does this not have a sound alarm? There's no audible alarm?
Oh,
It just lights up?
It'll be audible.
Oh, okay.
So once you get that, then what you do is you, with the gloved hand, it's going to give you high pressure alarm 3 times, and that's how you know that it is a good circuit. If anywhere along your process it does not come up with the patient disconnect when you first start it, or the high pressure alarm when you're testing it, then it's not good. So here it's saying high airway pressure.
Where's your audible alarm? Did you disable it?
Must be, because it is a very loud beeping alarm. So turn it on, and then let's say if we were to turn it on, but we don't have a patient attached to it, it's going to say there's your alarm, patient detected, and it's going to immediately bump into ventilating. The reason it does this is because if you hook it up to a patient and it detects that, then it's going to be like, oh crap, we got to ventilate right now. So there's that. But like I said, for now, we'll just start it without one. And we'll slowly work our way through the modes. One of the big things is that with this one, that startup menu is key to what you're doing. If you are going to be ventilating somebody who's intubated, sedated, then you're going to want to start it in adults and go from there. If you're ventilating somebody using a mask CPAP on either CPAP level or just BiPAP, then you're going to want to go to mask CPAP. That is the big difference. If you go to adult and then change the mode to mask CPAP, it does not work the way it is.
Do you have to turn it on, turn it off?
Yes.
So how do you, okay, so you turned it on, it's in adult. How do you move it to CPAP? You have to,
So it's a twist down to mask CPAP.
and you turn it on, turn it off?
So now what we do is we just green select. And now it's in the CPAP mode. The thing with CPAP is that you have to, if we're going to do for demonstration purposes, ventilate, because in CPAP it's supposed to be spontaneous. The patient has to be able to spontaneously ventilate off themselves. So I'm just going to have to press the manual breath every now and then to make sure it doesn't just start alarming, because it becomes very difficult to change these settings once it does get into this
because
alarm loop.
you're pushing the button because you're
Simulating
breathing.
Yeah, okay. It's just a manual breath. It's not something you have to do if you're on max CPAP. With max, the CPAP mode here, so we're in CPAP. And with that, you're going to see all kinds of things. So heart rate and SpO2, it says standby. To use that, we have to have a special probe attached to the top here. It plugs in. The new port has a spot for a probe like that too. We already have the monitor, so there's no need to have an SpO2 probe coming from our vent. So those first two will probably never be used. Underneath that, we have FiO2. So if you click, the whole point of this vent is it's a click, turn, and accept. So I'm going to click FiO2, I'm going to turn it to what I want it to be, and I'm going to accept it. Now it's going to give me an alarm. It's going to say, well, we can't suck in any more oxygen because we don't have an O2 tank attached. So
Because you put too much FiO2 on.
Yep, I turned it up. So if I put it back to room air, it goes away. The next box here we have, it says PIP, pressure support, and PEEP. So pressure support and PEEP is exactly as you would have seen on the Newport. So PEEP plus the pressure support will give you the IPAP, the inspiratory pressure. So this is just the way the CPAP works. Above that, the PIP, the peak inspiratory pressure right here. And you can see it's clear. It's like open. It's just the outline of 23. So if it's an outline number, that is something that is being measured. If it's a dark number, like FiO2, that is something you can set. So to go around in this little circle area, we just click it, and so now we can adjust the pressure support. So maybe we want that at 5 as well. If we want to change our PEEP, we just keep pressing that button until we get to PEEP, and we can adjust that. So maybe we want that to be 4 or something. Put it at, we'll just keep that 5. To change the alarm ranges, instead of going to an alarm screen, it's right here along the side, right underneath the alarm bell. So click, and we could change this. And this is for the measured value. It's because it wouldn't do us any good to have an alarm for something that we set. So if I set this alarm, it'd be for, I don't know, a PIP of 8. Anything less than 8 I want it to tell me about.
So you're alarming at the low values.
Yep. Tidal volume here, we can set that to alarm as well, because it's being measured in CPAP, because it's up to the patient to draw in as much air as they feel that they need with each breath, because they're awake and they just have it on their face. So you could set it to be, maybe you want it to alarm if the tidal volume's over 800, or if it's less than 300. You can go ahead and set that. And then breath per minute.
So where's your? It's got 2 offs. Is that your high and low?
Yep. So
okay.
Top one's high, this one's low.
Okay.
When it comes to breaths per minute, so you can have it set to if they breathe less than 4, tell me about it. Additionally, if it gets the apnea alarm, so the breaths per minute are too low, it'll tell you to change to a different mode because this patient is not breathing. So if we leave it here, there it goes. Backup mode started. So this is something the Newport did not have. It did not have that backup mode in there. So what I can do, I can silence it, but it's more or less just a procrastination button because it's gonna keep alarming, right? One thing about this vent is that it will give you options. It'll be like, okay, these are things you can do to fix this alarm. So if you have that alarm, start going down the list. Okay, what could be wrong? Patient's not breathing. That's why it has to do it. Maybe the circuit disconnected. Right? If it's not connected, then it's not going to be detecting that patient breathing at all. If we want,
did it increase the patient's respiratory rate?
now, it goes to 12.
Why did it go to 12?
Because 12 is typically the lowest breaths per minute that you can have for living, right?
Okay, right, but you had it set at 7.
Yeah, it was set to alarm below 4. So you usually want to set it up at like 10. So if anybody's breathing less than 10, then it would kick into 12.
I've missed something somewhere then.
You don't want anybody to be breathing less than 12, ideally, right?
Right.
But sometimes for a small period of time, they might be taking, because it's not taking your breaths over a minute, right? It's taking it over a certain amount of time.
Okay.
So maybe you have a short period of apnea for like 30 seconds. You don't really take that many breaths. And then the next 30 seconds, you take a bunch more. Some people might just have a strange breathing pattern like that. And if you're already on CPAP, BiPAP, you're probably doing some strange breathing at the time as well. So if you have it set for 10, you might get yourself through that first 10 seconds or the first 30 seconds. And the second bit, they will catch up themselves. But if you're looking at strange breathing patterns like that, you're probably already working through a bunch of other things on top of it.
Can you set this? You set the BPMs in?
You can set.
You want the machine to breathe for somebody 14 times, or
So if you start getting
or
into,
do you just set the I don't want to go no lower than?
that's what you set. So with your alarm here, you'd set, I don't want it to be lower than 10. So if it detects that, hey, someone's not breathing for 10, then it's going to go and kick into that backup mode. The backup mode's a basic setting, and that's why it alarms, is because, hey, this is just a quick backup. Like, you got to set a setting or something. You got to create something, because
So when it drops below 10, the machine will start automatically breathing and give you up
at
to
a
12.
at a standard like
Screw you, this
HCV
is
kind
what
of
you're
thing.
breathing now.
Yep.
Okay. And
Yep.
then it'll holler at you and tell you need to fix whatever is making us go in the back.
Yep. Either change your settings and intubate this patient, or do something different because they are not breathing. So if I start breathing, see if it goes away. It's not going to want to go away. It's upset. So
So the patient started breathing more.
the patient starts breathing again. It's
They
probably
were
going to keep
back
going.
up, but the alarm is still.
It's still going to go just
Wanting
because
to
it
make-
kicked into it. Yeah.
So how do you fix that then?
Yeah. I think at that point you're just going to have to.
You did turn it off and turn it back on?
No, you would
I was
just.
about to say shit.
Yeah, no, you wouldn't want to turn it off. You just keep it on because you'd still have your setting. The other thing is, so like, you already had your settings set, right? What you can do is you can come straight down to last settings. And when you click that, it'll go straight to that setting that you were just on.
So even if you were in that alarmed, you're in that alarmed position, the system's pissed off. It doesn't like what you're doing. You've gone into backups. You
So-
can go hit that last setting, or I mean, you keep turning it on and off. So
Right. So the reason
I'm trying to follow what you're doing while you're doing this. And
Right.
I'm missing something.
Oh. Okay. So if you had that patient kicked into the apnea alarm, right? That apnea alarm would go away with that patient breathing for themselves for, I think it's like a couple minutes. It goes away. But it does take time because obviously the vent's
Okay.
like, it's freaked out because, well, they weren't breathing. That apnea alarm came up, which is that's considered like a major alarm. So at that point, it has to be a time-based thing. It's like the patient has to prove that they're breathing on their own enough. So if we do go back to that masked CPAP. We ventilate for it. So we can change it now. Let's look at the bi-level, which is just BiPAP. All the settings are essentially the same. The difference is that it just delivers the breath. The Zoll representative said that it delivers the breath more like smoothly. So it's a more pleasant experience. In terms of pleasant, I don't think having BiPAP or CPAP on you would be very pleasant, but
It's not.
in terms of this, she said it's more, it's easier on a patient to be in the bi-level setting. The major difference you're going to see here is going to be, instead of pressure support and PEEP, you've got IPAP and EPAP. And in terms of our formulas, we've got IPAP minus EPAP. Going to be pressure support. And this is also known as PEEP. So that's the one thing to keep in mind. So in bi-level, we set these two settings. In the CPAP mode or the Newport mode, we set these two. So if we need to rearrange, all it is pressure support plus PEEP is equal to the IPAP. Essentially, both settings can accomplish the same purpose, especially for us, because we're not going to be setting up people usually in bi-level in the field. And we're not going to go to St. Joe Villa and be like, yep, this person's a BiPAP candidate, and slap them right on. We might put them on CPAP. We can start them in CPAP, put them on PEEP, but usually you want someone to be on CPAP first before you try putting them on BiPAP. So that's kind of where our differences come. We're going to be setting people up already in BiPAP, okay? If they're already in BiPAP on the super nice hospital ventilator, that's, I think costs about like 7 times what this ventilator is. So it's obviously operating at much higher. And then those things are like half the size of the table too. So they're just massive machines to very minutely calculate every little thing perfect. Keeping them in that bi-level so they have their IPAP in the EPAP delivery system is going to be just a smoother transition and might make that 20 minutes from Midlands to Bergen a little more pleasant.
So the PEEP and the PS are with the CPAP, is that correct?
PEEP and PEEP, yeah, this is going to be your CPAP mode. Or the same thing you'd see on the Newport ventilator as well.
Okay. Just making sure.
Mm-hmm. But in both of these modes, what all you're setting is you're setting the PEEP or EPAP. You're going to set pressure support, or you're going to set the IPAP, depending on which mode you're in, and you're going to set the FiO2. These are what you're setting. But the most important part of this mode is going to be the pressure trigger. Pressure trigger. So it's the pressure that has to be created within the circuit to initiate that breath. Since this mode is completely regulated by the patient, them being able to initiate this is arguably probably the most important part of it. If the patient cannot initiate this breath, it is worthless. The biggest problem with this vent is that it's going to start out your pressure trigger always in -2. And this is the pressure that it has to be a negative pressure of 2 that the ventilator measures to initiate that breath. This may be too much for a lot of the patients that we're going to be taking in BiPAP or CPAP from the ER to the
Because
ICU.
they're not able to draw that breath.
Exactly. They're already in a disease process. Maybe that their lungs are so swollen up, or it's obviously something's not working right. They're not breathing as they should be. They need help. okay? So then putting them at -2 pressure is just too far, but it's always gonna start at that. The problem is not only this, is that where this is located. It's not located in an easy to find spot. It's not there on the right. You click through your buttons, you're not gonna get the pressure trigger. That's probably the most difficult part of the vent, is this right here. Getting to this setting. To get to this setting, turn it on. So we're in mask CPAP. And it's found right down here. That little tiny, it says trigger. It's just trigger on here.
Is that screen always there, or is that the screen that pops up because you put it into CPAP
I
mode?
put it in the CPAP mode.
Okay.
So that's why it's here. So we see the trigger is -2. To get to that, we're going to go to the pressure box here, because we've got inspiratory pressure, pressure support, PEEP, right? So it somewhat makes sense to have pressure trigger under the pressure box. So if you hold this, then the cursor automatically moves down to trigger. So I'm holding, now it's on trigger. Now I can drop the trigger down. The lowest it goes is 0.5. So the best way to go about this is when you put this on a patient, have it in -0.5. And then from there, you can walk it up. So if you start at 0.5, then you can go up to -1, and then -1.5. And then you can go to 2. It's whatever trigger is ideal for that patient. Because sometimes 0.5 might be too little. Because you have it in 0.5 and
Is that a setting that the hospital staff is going to tell you you're going to need, or is that something you're going to have to find on your own?
something you find on your own. It's like I said, you just start at 0.5 and you can go to 1, then 1.5. But sometimes
So you're putting the patient on the vent and seeing at what point can he draw a breath?
yes. Drop it down to the bottom one, and then you can try walking it up. Try it at 1. Because the other problem is you get to 0.5, sometimes if you shake it, it'll initiate a breath. So obviously we don't want it to do that. We don't want it to be so sensitive that driving the squat is going to initiate a breath. That would also be kind of uncomfortable. So 0.5 to start, and then walk yourself up.
And it moves up in
0.5.
0.5 increments?
So 2 might actually be ideal for the patient. But starting everybody at 2, you're going to have people who can't draw on that, and you just are suffocating them until the apnea alarm kicks in. And then you're forcibly ventilating somebody who just needs CPAP. So getting to that pressure trigger is probably the most key part of the entire vent. Is that one part is just, I'd say it's unfortunate that they put it where they did. If they had found a better spot for it, I think that it would have worked out better. And that is I guess the totality of just the CPAP bi-level mode, whichever you want to call it by. It's not a very complex setting. It's mostly regulated by the patient, but getting to that pressure trigger is weird. It's not a good spot. Go back, setting up the ACMV, SIMV settings. That's nearly identical to what you're just setting up on the knee. Nothing is very largely changed in between those two. So if we go to adult, select that, hook it up. Alright. There we go, and we're done. With this, we've got FiO2 box, and then we've got our PIP is once again in the outlined numbers, letting you know that it's being measured. Below that, you see the PEEP, and then on the side, you've got the alarms for the different levels of PIP. In addition, we've got the tidal volume, which is 450, And we got your breaths per minute. In the breaths per minute box is the IE ratio, so the inspiration to expiratory ratio. That's not something that we usually want to mess with a whole lot, because that's saying, you know, if the inspiration is 1, then the expiration is going to be double what the inspiration time is. And there's only so much time in a minute, right? So if you have 12 breaths and your expiration time is twice what the inspiration time is, there's only so many breaths you can get in there. So when you start messing with the IE ratio too much, you're going to end up getting into a time where you might be breath stacking, so it's one to the next, just because that expiratory period is just so long. So much longer so than the inspiration period, or vice versa. So leaving the IE ratio is usually kind of what we're going to do. And when we go to the hospital, theirs are going to be flow regulated. So instead of having the IE ratio straight up as this vent does, it's going to have the I time, inspiratory time.
The hospital's gonna give you the eye time.
Yep. I time is also what's on the new port too.
Right.
So in order to change from the IE ratio to the I time, it's another one of those hold the box, select, and change it. We can mess with the I time to impact, or we can mess with the IE ratio to impact the I time. Because of course if you mess with how long someone's breathing out, it's going to mess with how long they could possibly breathe in a minute. Like I said, it's only 60 seconds in a minute. So you can only work it so many ways. But a lot of times we just want to change the I time. We don't want to mess with the IE ratio so much. So we're just going to mess with the I time. What we do is we go breaths per minute. I'm going to hold down the side button. And here we're going to have 3 additional parameters. So control parameter IE, if I select that, I can change it to TI, which is I time. Now, if I circulate around this box, I go breaths per minute to the alarms of breaths per minute to the I time. And I can change the I time down to something that we would normally see. So like 0.9. You see that all the time. 0.9, 1.
So the vent is programmed to measure everything in the IE ratio, but you can tell it, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do I time. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So you're just changing the way.
Yep. You can. The vent's going to
The
say
standard setting.
you want to change the IE ratio. No, I just want to change the I time. Because the IE ratio is automatically going to adjust itself based on what you set the I time.
Can you do it again so I can get it closer
Yeah.
up on camera?
So if we hold this down, control parameter, so it will say IE, but we'll just change it to TI, and we select it. And now when we go around here, we can change our I time. So in terms of selecting things with this ventilator, with the new port, it was tap the screen, arrow, and accept it. This one is you press the button until you get to the parameter, twist it,
Twist your dial till you get what
and
you
then
want.
accept it. Yeah. So they're both 3-step methods. It's just different means by which you select and change it. Yeah.
So when you do change it from the IE to the I time, does it automatically change like the alarm? Like you don't have to individually change the alarm values to I time as well?
The alarms are breath per minute.
Okay.
So
It just is based on whatever calculation.
because the ventilator is regulating the I time.
Okay.
The patient can't regulate
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
That's up to the ventilator.
Got it. Cool.
So that's kind of where it comes into. And it's breaths per minute. So the thing with having AC and V, volume control of the alarm on breaths per minute, the only alarm that's really going to go off is going to be your high value, right? Because the ventilator is going to breathe 12 times no matter what. It doesn't care if you're awake and fighting it, it's going to breathe 12 times. And if you're breathing over the vent, in addition to, so like our charts before, where the patient's initiating all kinds of breaths, it get alarm, hey, yeah, you set the alarm to 20 and this patient's breathing 25 times, but they're obviously awake, you probably should do something about that.
Okay.
That's where that comes into play.
Okay.
So if you wanted to you wanted to change this back.
So I want to change it back to IE.
Yeah.
So you hold that.
Okay, so it comes out, it tells me that it's in iTime.
Yep. So
Okay,
then you
that's
select.
that's what I wanted to see right there.
Yep. Yep. That's.
All right, so if you're in a menu
Mhm.
and you don't want to be in that menu anymore, how do you make this go away, or does it go away over time?
So
Or
if
is
you
there a clear button? Oh,
This is the
hit the
clear
X. Okay.
hit the X, get rid of it.
Okay.
This one also selects the trigger as -2, which is okay because we're not looking for a patient to breathe over the vent so much in ACMB. And obviously, like I said before, if you set it too low, so like let's say if we wanted to set, we're like, oh yeah, the trigger is -2, we need to put it down at 0.5. Like I said, it might be that in the rig, a bounce or something like that might, like, you know, someone bounces a little bit on that, it might change the pressure in there enough that it initiates another breath. And, you know, kind of like with pediatric patients, if you're breathing for somebody when they don't want to be breathing, you could cause damage to the airway. So leaving the trigger at 2 for most of your intubated sedated patients, absolutely fine. No problem with that. However, if you do have, there are going to be weird cases where it's like, yeah, they're in ACMP, but they're breathing at 36 and it's set to 20. Okay, well, in that instance, maybe I turn the trigger down just a little bit, so that way the patient can get those breaths that they're used to having at this point.
Okay, as the paramedic and the company boss, how much of this do you want us as EMT to be able to monkey with?
So you can be able to, initiate it, set it up.
I mean, you want us to do more than just a circuit check, or are we
You can do a circuit
pushing
check,
buttons?
and if your medic that you're with feels comfortable with you putting in settings, you can do that, but ultimately, it lies on the paramedic running the call. So they need to recheck the settings and make sure everything's correct. So you can assist as much as the medic is allowing you to, but ultimately, it falls on them and their license if something goes wrong.
Okay.
One other big thing is the biggest difference I'd say would be more operationally. So from the Z-Vent, you see, you turn it on, you put the setting to even just do the circuit check. Now, that ventilator is on. So if you go to change the settings, that ventilator is on. So let's say we get our vetting, or we'll set some settings, right? So let's change the tidal volume to let's do 48. And we'll do breaths at 16. I times 0.9. So we have our settings in, right? Now, a lot of times with our calls, right, we set in the settings and we don't want it to be sitting there sucking in oxygen and, have the ventilator running for 15 minutes while we're messing with medications and drips and stuff like that. So what you do is you get your settings in, turn it off.
And then you can go to last setting.
Exactly. So you have it, okay, where everybody's ready, we got the patient over onto our stretcher, they're all hooked up, because the last thing you usually want to do is to change the vent. Have everything ready, so that way, if the ventilator's not working, you just pop it back on the other ventilator, you can monkey with your ventilator, but you've already got them hooked up to all of your, everything. You've got the leads put on, you've got pads put on if you need to, SpO2, end titles ready, everything's ready to go. So all you do is you turn it on. You already know the circuit's good because you checked it, right? You checked it, put your settings in. All you do now is just go down to last setting. You turn that on. Now we're back right where we were. And that's probably the biggest operational change. The other thing maybe is that when we're running these ventilators, we're not going to have the test lung with us at all times. So when you're setting up that vent, you're putting in those settings, it's probably going to be alarming and it's going to be kind of annoying. I mean, obviously you can cancel it and get your settings in and then turn it off. But you can't sit there and, one by one. So you're going to want to either write down your settings or have them to put in all at once instead of running in and out of the room.
Well, that's what I've seen. That's what I've seen on the practice. Like, right. What are my numbers? What's this? What's out? And they would enter them in one at a time on the whole vent, but you just get them write them down and just hit this thing.
Yep.
But when you turn that off, like you turned it off, you turn it back on, does it go to a most common setting?
So it already has the preset settings.
Yeah.
So like if you click adult, it's gonna go to its adult setting. Its adult setting is gonna be like 450 tile volume, rated 12. Things that
Something to deviate from. It's always gonna, when you turn it on, it's always gonna be those numbers.
Exactly.
So you go back to the previous, and boom, and it'll hold previous settings.
as long as you need it to.
Like if we don't use that vent for 2 weeks. You come back and you hit previous settings, it'll be that 2 weeks ago patient.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. That is, and as I said, the battery on these things are outstanding. It's supposed to last like 6 months or something like that without being touched. Like it lasts pretty good. It was like every 10% of battery life on this is like an hour of like AC and V ventilating. So potentially you have 10 hours of ventilators straight. It's a smaller package. Works a little better. I don't know. I found that the best place to put it, the back of the stretcher, that little tray area. Stick it right on there. That's the easiest way. I suppose you could have it hanging off to the side because it doesn't stick out like the Newport one if it hangs off the side either.
Thomas, how long do you have at the beginning of it to put the settings on without having the lung on?
So it's going to throw the low pressure alarm, right? So if we turn it on and click adult, now it's going to give one alarm, and we're just going to go ahead and start setting stuff. So we're going to change it to 410 breaths, and turn it to 16. And change it to IE to I time. Change to I time. We're gonna turn it to 1. There we go. So you can keep going. It's just gonna say patient's disconnected. It's not screaming at you, but the red alarm's there. The other problem is that you don't have the cap on this. So you know, careful where you put this so you're not dragging it along the floor or something like that. Scooping up Lord knows what in the hospital. To change your mode here, click AC and we can go from volume to pressure. And this is going to change it a little bit here because now the PIP is solid. So the solid PIP, because that's what we're setting to now, right? The pressure control is you're giving gas through the tube until you get to the set pressure. So you set the peak inspiratory pressure. I set whatever I want that pressure to get to. So if I have my pressure chart, and this is my peak of 5, it's going to go up to whatever we set the peak to be.
And why would we do that?
So you would do pressure control or volume control when damage to the airways is usually the greatest concern. So pediatric patients, which the risk of barotrauma is much higher, we're going to be more concerned with pressure control.
Okay. You want to monitor, manage the pressure versus the volume if there's damage.
All right, because with pediatric patients, like you could have a 10-year-old that's like 5'8", 250 pounds, or you could have a 10-year-old who's like 3 foot tall, like 60 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
The variety you get is just so massive that you're like, okay. It's more ideal to worry about the pressure in their airways than it is to try to measure exactly what the tidal volume is. They don't fall into neat little categories like we have with adults.
And this thing, its default setting is to operate from pressure settings.
The default, well, when we turn
Because you said this thing is
regulated.
pressure regulated.
Yep. So that's more about your triggers, right? Your triggers, and it's also going to give you the PIP. So it's always following the PIP. So if your PIP gets too high, it's going to cut the breath. it's gonna say airway pressure is too high, we're not giving any more than this because it's higher than you said it to be.
Okay.
So when we're in volume control, it's breathing up and we set the limit to be here. This is your PIP alarm. It's going, and it's breathing up, and then it hits that alarm, it's gonna say, nope, I can't go any more than that. It's gonna go down, and it's gonna tell you, hey, airway pressure's high, you need to do something about that. You set it to be this. Is either you set your alarm wrong, and obviously the airway pressure is higher than it is because of some reason or other, maybe they've got emphysema, COPD, something like that. Or you need to do something to correct a possible obstruction, right? It could be a mucus plug, there could just be a lot of mucus in that airway. You look at some of the trach patients, and it's just like constantly coming out mucus, and you gotta suction for 5 minutes of time of sucking and letting it breathe, and suck real quick, try to get more out so there's more airway moving through. Or it could be you need to give albuterol, something like that, open up those airway passages. So there's lots of different things that could be going on, and you gotta kind of work your way down that list of what is causing that high airway pressure. Maybe you're stepping on the circuit and it's freaking out, like, hey, can't get anything through this. Or it could be the patient fighting against the vent. Sometimes the patient's coughing against the vent or biting on the tube, you're gonna get that high airway pressure alarm. So this is what we mean by the pressure regulated versus the volume regulated vent. Because with like the Newports, you have the flow. It regulates itself on the flow. So when you're in AC and V, it's giving up to a maximum flow of air, of gas. It's giving this flow. Whereas with this, it's giving up to that maximum pressure, which is good. A lot of the hospital ventilators do have that pressure cap on there, so it's not going to give anything more than the cap. But with pressure control, it's something I think I've used maybe 3 times. Everything else has been straight up volume control, especially with us, because we're not going to be doing a whole lot of pediatric patients with children's service being here. But if you do have a pediatric patient, a lot of times you're going to need the pediatric circuit. The reason you need the circuit, be like, well, if we can do pressure, why are you worried about the circuit? Because this circuit is made for tidal volumes greater than 300. So with a pediatric patient, you might have something like a toddler or something like that.
Right.
They're going to be breathing less than a tidal volume of 300. In that case, you need a pediatric circuit, so they can deliver that lower.
So he's gonna have a smaller tube.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
How do you do the circuit check?
Circuit check. All right. Go ahead, and I'll have you.
Oh. Okay. So we've set this thing up.
Got it hooked up.
In. Turn it on.
Turn on.
Gloved hand.
Yep. So click it into adult.
Okay, it's on adult.
So
All right.
So I have to click anything?
press the green.
Green arrow, right?
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Now, does it give you patient disconnect alarm?
Patient disconnect, yeah.
Okay, so you know now that if there's nothing attached to it, it's going to say there's no patient. Okay, so now you put your gloved hand over the entrance, and you're going to wait for it to give you 3 high airway pressure alarms. That ensures you that the
Okay, airway pressure high.
Yep. Okay, still high. And still high.
Okay, so it's just gonna chirp at me 3 times like that.
Yep. That's it.
Okay.
That's all you gotta do. That's how you know your circuit.
And now the circuit's good.
Yep. So the reason that is it's more of a, you have to understand why circuit check is what it is. It's not, the other one it told you, hey, your circuit's good. This one's saying, if there's no patient, it's gonna tell you there's no patient. Okay, so that lets you know that the proximal line exhalation valve's working.
Okay.
And then when you cap it, it's gonna say, hey, if there's something obstructing, then yeah, it's obstructed. Because if this was cut right here, when you cap that end, it's not gonna give you that higher pressure.
Right.
So pressure is gonna come off the side.
Okay.
That's all it is for your.
Like 17 pages. I'll give you the nice notes once I write them out.
Yeah.
I have to write them out on my iPad, make them all pretty.
Yeah, I'll copy your notes.
Alright.
Will these be put in the
truck with us, or?
No.
Okay.
Because all it takes is for them to fall once, and then it like cracks the top, and these are so easy to lose. I mean, I think about how much stuff we have with us when we take these vent calls.
Oh, yeah.
These are just like 8 pumps, and then they've got all their stuff you gotta take with them, and then there's the patient, and then you've got the monitor on one side, this on the other side, or what, whatever it comes to. The one thing I do want to say is that the plug-in power. When you go to plug in the power, it's you grab it straight down here,
in the ass.
and you pull it straight up. There's no twisting, no turning. It's in and out. Don't twist anything on the top. Nothing. Just pull it up.
Don't break the power source.
What? Why do you point at me?